The courtroom was packed, every seat taken as Judge Beryl Howell prepared to make an example out of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Cameras were rolling, reporters scribbling, and the tension was thick in the air. Howell, known for her stern demeanor, leaned forward and tried to set the tone immediately. Congresswoman Crockett, Howell's voice rang through the chamber, "You may think your sharp words and theatrics can work on television, but this is a court of law. Here, you will follow my rules." Jasmine remained calm, her posture upright, her expression unbothered. She knew this was not just about her, it was about silencing someone who refused to back down when confronted with power. Howell's words were sharp, but Jasmine's silence was sharper. The crowd leaned in, sensing something was about to unfold. The judge smirked, believing she had gained control. But Jasmine simply folded her hands on the desk and spoke softly, her voice carrying across the room. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the law does not belong to you. It belongs to the people, and I know it well." The room stirred. For the first time, Howell's confident expression wavered. Judge Howell's eyes narrowed as if she hadn't expected Jasmine to answer with such composure. "This is my courtroom," Howell snapped, her gavel striking hard against the bench. "You will not grandstand in here." But Jasmine leaned forward, her voice still calm, almost measured, yet every word struck with precision. "Grandstanding, Your Honor, is when someone abuses their position to silence truth. What I'm doing is stating fact. And fact is what this courtroom was built upon." The audience murmured, cameras zooming in on Jasmine's face. Even reporters stopped writing for a moment, realizing they might be witnessing a rare reversal, where a judge, used to controlling the narrative, was being matched point for point. Howell's frustration grew visible. She tried again, her tone sharp and commanding. "One more outburst like that, Congresswoman, and I'll hold you in contempt." Jasmine's lips curved into the slightest hint of a smile. "Contempt, Your Honor, is reserved for those who disrespect the law. If standing on the side of truth is contempt, then I'll gladly wear it." The room erupted in gasps. Even a few in the gallery clapped before Howell angrily banged the gavel for silence. But the power in the room had already shifted, everyone could feel it. Judge Howell's hand shook slightly as she set the gavel down. Her authority, usually unshakable, was being tested in front of a national audience. She cleared her throat and tried to reassert control. "Congresswoman Crockett, you may think clever words will shield you," Howell said, her tone icy. "But cleverness doesn't change the law." Jasmine raised her head, her eyes locked on the judge. She spoke slowly, deliberately, every syllable echoing through the chamber. "You're right, Your Honor. The law cannot be changed by cleverness. But it can be twisted by those who believe their power is above it." The silence in the room was deafening. Every reporter's pen hit paper at once, every lens fixed on Jasmine's face. Howell opened her mouth to respond, but Jasmine didn't stop. "I studied the law, I practiced the law, and I now serve to write the law. I know its weight. I know its purpose. And I know when it's being used as a weapon rather than a shield." Gasps swept through the courtroom again. Howell's jaw tightened as she leaned back in her chair, visibly rattled. She tried to mask her discomfort, but the tremor in her fingers gave her away. For the first time, it wasn't Howell setting the pace. It was Jasmine. Judge Howell adjusted her glasses, buying herself a moment. The cameras caught the hesitation, and the audience knew it, her grip on the room was slipping. "Congresswoman," Howell said sharply, "this proceeding is not about you making speeches. It is about accountability." Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady but filled with force. "Accountability, Your Honor, is exactly why I'm here. The people deserve to see how justice is applied, and how it is sometimes bent. If this court seeks accountability, then it should begin with itself." The gallery erupted in whispers, the tension rising like a storm. Even the court officers glanced at each other, uneasy at the shift. Howell banged her gavel, but it no longer silenced the crowd the way it once did. "You will not lecture this court. Howell barked, her voice cracking slightly. Jasmine didn't flinch. I don't need to lecture. The truth speaks louder than I ever could. And right now, Your Honor, it's speaking to everyone in this room. The words hit like thunder. A reporter whispered into his microphone, Crockett just flipped the courtroom on its head. Howell's face flushed with frustration, but it was clear, her dominance had been broken. Judge Howell's patience was unraveling. Her voice rose, louder than before, trying to reclaim authority. You are dangerously close to crossing a line, Congresswoman Crockett. This court will not be made a spectacle. But Jasmine, poised and unshaken, responded with words that carried like steel. A spectacle happens when truth is buried under intimidation. What I am doing is uncovering it, and the people watching deserve nothing less. The audience leaned forward in unison, captivated. Even seasoned reporters whispered that they had never seen a member of Congress hold their ground so fiercely against a judge. Howell slammed her gavel again. Enough, she snapped. But the sound, once commanding, now felt hollow. The tension in the room made it clear, her gavel no longer ruled the chamber. Jasmine stood slowly, her presence commanding the room. Your Honor, you may try to silence me, but the law is not on your side today. And the nation is watching to see who truly honors it. Gasps echoed once more. Cameras flashed. The balance of power had shifted entirely. Judge Howell looked cornered, while Jasmine stood stronger than ever. Judge Howell leaned back in her chair, visibly rattled. She tried to steady herself, but her voice betrayed a slight tremor. Congresswoman, you are walking a dangerous path. I could remove you from this courtroom if I chose. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She took a slow breath, then answered with the kind of calm that cut sharper than anger. You could, Your Honor. But removing me would not remove the truth. It would only prove my point, that this is not about justice, but control. The crowd stirred again, and this time, even the court stenographer lifted their eyes from the keys. Every word felt historic, as if history itself was being recorded in that moment. Howell's lips pressed into a thin line. You think you can turn this court into your stage? Jasmine stepped forward, her voice rising just enough to fill the space. No, Your Honor. I don't need a stage. I only need the law, and the courage to stand on it. If that shakes this courtroom, then maybe it should. A reporter whispered under their breath, she's dismantling the judge in real time. Howell tried to mask her frustration, but the shift in the atmosphere was undeniable. Jasmine was no longer defending herself, she was leading the room. Judge Howell's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of her bench. The cameras caught the tightness in her jaw, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. For the first time, the audience wasn't looking at the judge as the authority, they were looking at Jasmine as the force in the room. Congresswoman Crockett, Howell said slowly, struggling to regain her composure, if you truly believe the law is on your side, then prove it with evidence. Not rhetoric. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. She pulled out a stack of neatly prepared documents, sliding them onto the desk with deliberate precision. Gladly, Your Honor. Every word I've spoken is backed by this record. Would you like me to read it aloud for the court, or shall I submit it for the world to see? The gallery gasped. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Howell's eyes darted to the papers, then back to Jasmine, realizing she had walked straight into a trap. You're playing a dangerous game, Howell muttered. Jasmine lifted her chin. No, Your Honor. I'm following the rules of the game you thought you controlled. And now everyone can see how it really works. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of cameras clicking. Jasmine had seized the narrative, and Howell could feel the courtroom slipping entirely out of her grasp. Judge Howell's expression hardened, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. You think producing a stack of papers will undo the authority of this court? Jasmine leaned forward, her tone unshakable. Not undo it, remind it. Authority is meaningless without integrity. These papers don't just prove my case, Your Honor. They prove that this courtroom's attempt to silence me has no legal ground. The gallery buzzed louder now. Some spectators even nodded, while reporters hurried to transmit the drama unfolding. The tide of public opinion inside the room had clearly shifted. Howell's gavel struck again, but instead of quieting the crowd, it echoed like a desperate plea. "This is highly irregular," she barked. Jasmine's reply came swift and direct. "What's irregular, Your Honor, is a judge trying to intimidate an elected official into silence, on live record. What's irregular is forgetting that this system belongs to the people, not to any one bench." The room exploded in gasps and scattered applause before bailiffs called for order. But the damage was done. Judge Howell's authority, once absolute, was now visibly crumbling. And Jasmine stood taller than ever, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who knew the fight was already hers. Judge Howell's face reddened, her eyes narrowing into slits. She tried to strike back with authority. "Congresswoman Crockett, this court is not a place for political theater. Your constant interruptions will not be tolerated." Jasmine tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but piercing. "This isn't theater, Your Honor, it's truth. The difference is that truth doesn't need a script. It only needs courage to be spoken aloud." The audience broke into hushed murmurs again, the sound filling every corner of the chamber. Howell's gavel came down with a sharp crack, but it no longer carried weight. The sound was drowned out by the energy in the room, an energy that now centered on Jasmine. Reporters leaned forward eagerly, sensing headlines forming in real time. One whispered to another, "She's not just defending herself, she's dismantling Howell piece by piece." Howell adjusted her robe, trying to recover. "You think the cameras will protect you, Congresswoman? Public opinion doesn't override the law." Jasmine stood slowly, her voice steady and firm. "You're right, Your Honor. Public opinion doesn't override the law. But neither does fear. And I refuse to be ruled by fear in a courtroom where justice is supposed to live." The crowd erupted again, applause breaking through despite the bailiff's shouts. Howell's gavel pounded, but it was too late, the court no longer belonged to her. Judge Howell's gavel strikes grew louder, but each bang sounded weaker than the last. She raised her voice, almost shouting, "This chamber will come to order immediately." But the crowd had tasted the shift in power. Their eyes weren't on the bench anymore, they were fixed on Jasmine, who stood tall, unshaken. Jasmine let the noise settle before speaking, her tone calm but commanding. "Order doesn't come from a gavel, Your Honor. Order comes from fairness. And fairness comes from respecting the truth, even when it's inconvenient." Her words cut through the tension like a blade. The murmurs quieted, not out of fear of the judge, but out of respect for Jasmine. Howell glared down at her, but there was no denying the loss of control. She tried again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Congresswoman Crockett, you're undermining the dignity of this court." Jasmine's reply came like thunder. "No, Your Honor. What undermines dignity is abusing power. What restores it is standing up to it." The gallery gasped, and a few clapped before being hushed. The cameras zoomed closer, catching every flicker of Howell's discomfort and every ounce of Jasmine's composure. For the first time in her career, Judge Howell looked cornered, and Jasmine looked unstoppable. Judge Howell leaned forward, her voice dropping into a stern growl. "Congresswoman Crockett, do not mistake this momentary chaos for victory. The law will have the final say." Jasmine didn't back down. She met Howell's glare with steady eyes and answered in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. "The law always has the final say, Your Honor. That's why I'm not afraid, because the law is on my side." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously, knowing they were capturing a historic exchange. Howell's fingers drummed against the bench. "You presume too much power for yourself, Congresswoman." Jasmine took a slow step closer, never raising her voice, but making it ring with conviction. I don't presume power. I carry responsibility, the responsibility to speak when silence would betray the very people who trust us with justice." The gallery fell completely silent, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Even Howell, for a brief moment, seemed unable to respond. One reporter whispered into his recorder, "Crockett isn't just defending herself anymore, she's rewriting the moment." And as Jasmine stood firm, it became clear, the courtroom no longer belonged to Judge Howell's authority. It belonged to Jasmine's resolve. Judge Howell's composure cracked further. She shuffled the papers before her, searching for something, anything, that could restore her control. "Congresswoman, you may have passion, but passion doesn't outweigh precedent." Jasmine's lips curved into a faint smile. "Precedent, Your Honor, was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to guide justice, not to shield those who misuse power." The room stirred again. The words hit harder than any outburst could have, and Howell's face betrayed a flicker of doubt. Jasmine continued, her tone steady, deliberate. "I didn't come here to put myself above the law. I came here to remind this court that no one is above it, not even the bench that wields the gavel." The gallery erupted in a wave of whispers. Reporters' cameras clicked rapidly, recording every expression on Howell's face as her authority visibly crumbled. Howell gripped her gavel but didn't strike it. Her hand hovered, then fell back to the desk, defeated by the reality that her power over the moment was gone. Jasmine stood taller, her voice ringing with finality. "The law belongs to the people. And today, the people have seen the truth for themselves." The crowd gasped again, this time not in shock, but in recognition. The momentum was now entirely with Jasmine. Judge Howell's shoulders stiffened as if bracing for a storm. She tried once more, her voice quieter, almost defensive. "Congresswoman Crockett, you speak boldly, but bold words don't change the reality of this court." Jasmine's reply was immediate, sharp yet calm. "The reality has already changed, Your Honor. Not because of my words, but because the people watching now see what those words reveal." The audience leaned in, captivated. Even the court officers stood frozen, their eyes locked on Jasmine. The cameras caught every detail, Howell's tightening jaw, Jasmine's unwavering presence. Howell grasped for control. "If you think you can humiliate this court, you are gravely mistaken." Jasmine shook her head slowly. "I'm not here to humiliate the court. I'm here to protect it, from being turned into a tool of intimidation. Justice isn't served by silencing those who question abuse. It's served by upholding truth, even when it's uncomfortable." The crowd erupted into murmurs and quiet applause again, overwhelming the gavel's weak strike. For the first time, Howell looked not just challenged, but exposed. Jasmine stood firm, her voice carrying a final blow. "You tried to crush me, Your Honor. But you forgot one thing, the truth can't be crushed." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Every spectator, every reporter, every camera captured the moment Judge Howell's authority collapsed, and Jasmine Crockett stood as the undeniable victor. The silence in the courtroom was almost deafening, but it wasn't the silence of respect for Judge Howell, it was the silence of realization. Everyone present knew the power dynamic had shifted beyond repair. Judge Howell sat frozen, her gavel resting uselessly at her side. She looked out at the gallery, but instead of fear or obedience, she saw determination in the eyes of the people. They were no longer under her command, their attention belonged to Jasmine. Jasmine took a step forward, her voice low but steady, carrying more weight than a shout ever could. "Justice doesn't collapse under questioning. It collapses under corruption. And today, this courtroom has shown which side it stands on." The reporters captured every word, their cameras flashing like lightning. The scene was already racing across headlines, bound to spread far beyond those four walls. Howell's lips parted, but no sound came. She had no more threats, no more warnings, no more authority to lean on. Every attempt to silence Jasmine had only magnified her strength. Jasmine turned slightly toward the gallery, her words now directed to them as much as the bench. If this moment proves anything, it's that no one, no matter their robe or their title, can erase the truth. The people see it. And they will not forget it. The chamber erupted with applause, louder this time, uncontrollable despite the bailiff's calls for order. Judge Howell lowered her gaze, defeated. The courtroom thundered with applause, the sound rolling through the chamber like a verdict of its own. Reporters stood on their feet, cameras flashing, as if history itself was unfolding in real time. Judge Howell sat slumped in her chair, her authority shattered in front of a national audience. The gavel that once commanded silence now looked like nothing more than a piece of wood in her hand. She didn't raise it again. Jasmine Crockett stood tall at the center of it all, her presence unshaken, her voice ringing with finality. You tried to crush me, Your Honor. But in doing so, you only proved what I've said all along, that truth will always outlast intimidation.